Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway. Gayatri is otherwise engaged today on the killings of Tony Blair, out soon. Black Lives Matter is the cry from across the Atlantic, and it's echoing here. Politicians, though, find it hard to join in and have to add in brackets, so to speak. But so do white lives, blue lives, etc. Meanwhile, the new Prime Minister, until earlier this week, Home Secretary, acknowledges on the steps of Downing Street, and I'm quoting her here, that if you're black, you're treated more harshly by the justice system, which makes you wonder why she hasn't done anything about that during all her years in power as the longest-serving Home Secretary ever. You have to laugh when they promise to bring harmony where there is discord. At least you do when you're listening to our first guest, Ava Vidal, and baby Mimi. I regularly listen to Ava, not yet Mimi, as one of her fans on Mock the Week and elsewhere, and I'm glad she's joining us on the Sputnik. And little Mimi is perfectly poised for this interview.
She is.
And if she has anything to say, I'd be happy to record her first words on television. Ava, I want to talk about your work first, if I may. You're a fantastic comedian.
Thank you.
And you are one of a generation now that has begun to weaponize humour for political purposes. The previous generation in the 80s did that before they went off to become multimillionaires and members of the House of Lords. But you're doing it now. People like Frankie Boyle are doing it now with devastating effect. When you're thinking of your sketches, your gig, do you think first about what's funny or what's funny about what's happening now?
I kind of think it's sort of in the middle, because what I do is I'll tend to write about what's happening and I'd probably be angry about it and think, but how do I make this funny and more palatable? Because I'm absolutely furious about a lot of things that are happening at the moment. So I kind of tend to do that and then, you know, put jokes in it. But like you said, sometimes, you know, with Theresa May talking about Black lives when she's been Home Secretary for so many years, sometimes it writes itself. Indeed,
truth is stranger than fiction. There's the woman who has been in charge of the Interior Department in our country for the last 6 years, telling us, without a blush, that if you're black, you're treated more harshly by the justice system, something that she never told us before.
Well, no, and didn't, like you said, did nothing about it. And I remember seeing the debate about deaths in custody, and it was absolutely shameful. There was like 4 people sitting in the House of Commons. It's just, they just don't care, so...
Deaths in custody, strange deaths at the hands of the police.
Stop and search.
No one in the political system, hello, darling, can quite bring themselves to say Black Lives Matter.
No.
You see, the true answer, isn't it, to those who say, well, so do white lives and so do blue lives. White lives and blue lives already matter.
Exactly.
It's black lives that currently don't matter. You're a Labour supporter, a Jeremy Corbyn supporter.
I'm a Jeremy Corbyn supporter,
That must be making you even angrier. It certainly is making me angrier.
It's heartbreaking to me, personally, because I know how I felt growing up. I know that our parents used to tell us that the Labour Party, when they came to this country, were the only people that were welcoming. I mean, we're lifelong Labour. I've been doing gigs for the Labour Party for the past couple of years, and I have been... I've expressed my disappointment with them and the direction that they were going in. So when Jeremy Corbyn came back and brought it back to sort of, you know, the grassroots level, what we expect from the Labour Party, and he was concerned about people who had no power and who had no voice, it was just absolutely brilliant. And sort of doing the gigs and stuff like that, they're completely sold out, and sort of seeing the you know, when they were sold out, you'd see young people who you thought had no interest in voting for anything but X Factor climbing up on windows to look at him through. People don't understand that, the power of you know, the draw he has to people. Sure. People don't get that.
Popular power, power in the communities, in the streets, versus parliamentary power, the people who creep around the corridors of power. That's what this conflict is really about, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it's about. People, you know, I remember during the leadership contest and stuff, when I was asked to do some gigs for certain people, there were certain of his rivals that couldn't even fill a room of 150. With Jeremy, we had like thousands of people who were just dying to get tickets, and there were ticket touts outside of Jeremy Corbyn, you know, thing like it was some kind of Rolling Stones concert going, you want a ticket, you want a ticket.
You'd need to pay people to take a ticket for some of his rivals.
Yes, exactly.
Now, we don't know where this story is going to go, even between this recording and when we're broadcast on Saturday.
Yeah.
But take a punt. Is Jeremy going to win re-election, and will that be the end of it in your view?
I don't think it's going to be the end of it at all if he wins. I think he's going to win, despite their attempts. I mean, they've closed every loophole. I mean, it's heartbreaking for a Labour government to impose a £25 fee, knowing who their supporters are. It is as bad as when they did the anti-immigration cups during the little mugs they were selling, knowing that a lot of immigrants support that party. They are so willing to try and get themselves into power that they just don't care about cutting us off, because at the end of the day they know that we don't really have anywhere to go. But I'm telling them this, if they don't stop doing what they're going to do, the Green Party is going to have a massive surge, because that's where I'm going.
Now, tell us about your career now. Yeah. Mimi is 12 weeks old.
She is, yeah.
Luckily, she's got stage presence already. You could probably take her on the stage of Mock the Week. What's coming up? What have you got in front of you?
At the moment, I'm just doing little bits of comedy here and there, stand-up gigs. I'm trying to do a bit more writing now. I was writing at the Telegraph.
I was going to ask you about that.
Which was very interesting.
How much writing do you do?
Whenever I'm asked to, or if I feel really strongly about a story, I can write to an editor and say, look, could I do a piece? So I did a piece on Jeremy supposedly being sexist. That just really annoyed me. As much as I want, really, but I want to do something a bit more long-form, like a book, maybe about the state of racial politics in this country at the moment, because it is ridiculous. I think it's a worldwide thing. I think black people and Muslim people, and I know they overlap, are being gaslighted globally, really. You know, if you can see a newspaper heading and it will say Muslim man terrorist, and a white person does the same thing and it goes lone wolf, and we keep telling you and pointing this out, I can't believe collectively that the world can't see what's going on. So to me, you know, I want to get into the fact that I think it's kind of deliberate and it's provocation at this point.
A bit of divide and rule is always always good. Let's look at the United States. I don't know what your relations are with the United States, or whether just as a black person in Britain you can't help but hear the echo. But the retort of gunfire is deafening. Yeah. It seems like hardly a week goes by without a black person being gunned down by a white police officer in a blue uniform. And all of this under a black president, Barack Obama.
I know he's a complete disappointment to a lot of people. I actually believe, do you agree? She said he's a disappointment too. I actually think Jeremy, like people are always talking about Barack Obama being assassinated, but I think that Jeremy will be in more physical danger than Barack Obama, because he's actually challenging the establishment. I think in terms of Black Lives Matter, it's going to resonate with you as a black person here, because you're seeing people who are dying for looking like you. And, you know, the Bahamas have put out a warning to black people travelling to America to be careful. And not long after the Trayvon Martin case, my son, who's 17 now and 6'3", went to Florida. And I was on tenterhooks the whole time he went with his dad, saying, like, don't go out, don't do this, don't do that, don't run anywhere, don't look at these people too much, try and stay near the hotel, be safe, you know? It was kind of, it's scary, it's absolutely terrifying that this kind of thing is happening you know, but I don't know, I think it's going to take, as Malcolm X said, you know, the oppressed don't willingly give over the power. They're going to fight for it, and I'm really proud to see what they're doing over there, and the fact that they're out every day and they're marching every day and they're saying we're not having it anymore.
Well, amongst the very youngest people, that's true, but the baby boomer generation of black politicians, even more than President Obama, have really lost their way. They started out with a very clear path in their mind. They formed a black congressional caucus and they had demands, but nowadays they're kind of anybody's. I mean, they were whipping people in to vote for Hillary Clinton, even though Bill Clinton put more black people in jail than any president in the history of the United States.
What do they call our kids? Super predators or something, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just think that when people get to a certain level, I think it's going to take people with the personality of Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn to break the status quo. Because unfortunately, as they say, power corrupts, and the higher up you get and they see the little perks and stuff that they can get from it, or they, you know, other things kick in as well, like they're scared for their family. They just want to make a living. They want to be able to provide for their family and stuff. So then they become less vocal on these things. So that's the way it tends to work. It's sad, really.
I mean, we had, of course, you quoted him, the great Malcolm X. We even had for a relatively brief period of time the Reverend Jesse Jackson, radical leaders who had a following on the street. We don't really have that at the moment. It's quite incoherent. The young black people and their allies, white and other mixed race people that are out there on the street with them. You think that Black Lives Matter resonates here too? We've got, as you alluded earlier, more than our fair share of deaths in custody and deaths at the hand of the police and so on. Is that going to break out into the political system? Are you going to feature that on stage in your work?
I already have a couple of years ago when Trayvon Martin was killed. I think I did the first demonstration outside the US Embassy, trying to draw the parallels between what is happening in the UK to what is happening in the US. And I've often been on Twitter and stuff talking to US activists, and because, you know, they'll often post things like, this amount of black people were killed in America and one black person was killed in England. And I was like, hey, don't let it fool you. We might not have the guns that you have, but they call it something different. I mean, I was a prison officer for 5 years as well. So I saw the system up close and I saw how it worked. Somebody dying in restraints or dying of a heart attack or dying of asphyxia, it's still the same thing. We might not be dying in the same method that you're dying. If you look at Brazil and look at the amount of black people who die at the hands of authorities over there as well, it's worldwide. So yeah, I'm very much hoping and praying that people will see that, make the connection and stop competing with each other over it.
What about a British version of Orange is the New Black? You could write that. Ava Vidal, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mimi, thank you, darling. You were just wonderful. You stole the show.
Thank you for having us.
Coming up after the break, the attempted crucifixion of Jeremy Corbyn went off half-cocked this week. Find out how after this. Welcome back to Sputnik. One of the most unedifying spectacles in Labour's 116-year history has been played out over the last 10 months, with full state approval and the complicity of the state broadcaster, the BBC. The overwhelming mandate of the British opposition leader has been systematically subverted, with the full-scale collaboration of most of his own MPs. It has been, in the words of Oscar Wilde, the unspeakable in full pursuit of the uneatable. Helping us through all of this is an up-and-coming young Labour man, Matthew Turner, a writer on The Independent and other places, including Evolve Politics. Thank you very much, Matt, for coming on the Sputnik. Most of our viewers know what's already happened. Let me turn to what's happened since the National Executive Committee, by a majority of 4, put Jeremy Corbyn back on the ballot paper, and we thought, that's it. Now we've got plain sailing to a leadership election. It's gotten rather complicated in the last 48 hours. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it has. I mean, the 80 to 14 vote for Jeremy Corbyn was a surprise to me. It was outstanding. But straight afterwards, there was a motion after Jeremy Corbyn had left to suspend Labour Party members who haven't been members for more than 6 months voting completely. And they had to change the registered supporter fee all the way up to £25, which does disenfranchise 130,000 new members who have joined to support Jeremy Corbyn's policies in the last few weeks. Since then, they have also tried to put a ban on new union members too. The 6-month ban applies for that as well. So it might not be the victory lap that we thought it might be. They are putting out all the stops to kind of rig the system.
Well, of course, they can only do it because of the here today, gone tomorrow National Executive Committee that they have.
Yeah.
A new one will be elected in September.
Yep.
It's likely to be overwhelmingly pro-Jeremy Corbyn.
Certainly.
But in the fag end of the tenure of this NEC, they are, as you say, pulling out all the stops. Now, as you know, I've been around Labour politics for almost half a century, and even I haven't seen anything quite like this. The members who have been disenfranchised seem to me to have a copper-bottomed legal challenge at their disposal, because they joined and there was never a whisper that they wouldn't have the rights which have now been taken away from them in, as you say, quite dubious circumstances. And the unions, particularly Unite, the most important union that gives Labour millions of pounds a year, they're not going to take this lying down, are they?
No, I don't think so. I don't think the members should either. Obviously, even the challengers, Angela Eagle, only 2 days ago, was urging people on national television to sign up to vote in the leadership election. When...
Never mind that. Gloria Del Piero was writing in The Sun, asking its readers to join the Labour Party to overthrow her own leader. Couldn't make that one up, but go on.
No, I mean, on that, you know, I couldn't really fathom the irony of Neil Kinnock encouraging right-wing entryism into the Labour Party for The Guardian.
Having hunted the left-wing entryists out back in the 80s.
That was pretty spectacular. But when members signed up over the last few weeks, it specifically said, once you signed up, that you would be able to vote in leadership elections.
Yeah, it's a breach of contract, and any individual who did join on that basis and has now been robbed of it has prima facie a case. But it would be better if it was a class action, a working class action, with a very large number of members taking that to court. Do you see any sign of that?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think there is potential for it, but I think we're more likely to see a challenge from Unite over the ban on affiliated supporters who have joined in the past 6 months also. I think there's definitely a case for that.
Well, this is a strike at the heart of the trade union relationship to the Labour Party. It's one of the great ironies that one of the reasons why the right wing of the Labour Party were so keen on OMOV, one member, one vote, which is supposed to be what we now have, was to restrict the power of the unions. Now that they've got one member, one vote, they don't like how the members vote, and wishing they could go back in time, the law of unintended consequences. I think that Unite are definitely going to take this matter up legally, but let's assume for a minute that nobody who joined after last January has a vote, and therefore, more or less, the electorate is as it was when Jeremy Corbyn won the 59% last September.
Yeah.
Is it the case that both Angela Eagle and Owen Smith are going to run, or is only one of them going to run? And what's the likely result in your view?
I think that they will have to settle on a unity candidate eventually. I think
it's a bit silly having two unity candidates, isn't it?
No, it is. I think they're both going to run for a while. They're going to poll with members and see who does best. I imagine one of them will drop out and endorse the other against Jeremy Corbyn. The membership is a little bit different to when Jeremy got elected, because a lot of the registered supporters who paid £3 to vote for Jeremy last time, a lot of those did join up immediately.
As full members?
Yes, and moreover, a few of the more right-wing Labour members also opted to leave upon Jeremy Corbyn's election. So it is a little different.
Nick Cohen, Dan Hodges, all got columns in right-wing publications now.
That's true. There is about 20,000 or so who did actually sign up in the last few weeks to vote for Jeremy Corbyn's challenger. Nowhere near as many as people who signed up to vote for him. But I think Jeremy Corbyn's got a really, really good shot of winning. I think he's the favourite. You know, if we were having this leadership election on the old rules, I think it would have been a landslide. There wouldn't have really been any point in this leadership contest whatsoever. Now they've managed to change the rules. It is going to be a little bit closer. But generally, I think Labour members over the last couple of weeks have seen who the ideologues in the Labour Party really are. They don't want a fairer manager of a twisted system which is against them, like Owen Smith or Angela Eagle. They still want an architect for a new and better way, and that is exactly what Jeremy Corbyn represents, and I think that's why he will get over 50%.
Let's deal with the runners and riders then. Angela Eagle seems to me to be fatally handicapped by her support of the Iraq War, her opposition to the establishment of the Chilcot inquiry into the war, her support for tuition fees, her attitude to welfare cuts, and many, many other things, actually. She's got quite a lot of black marks on her record that Jeremy Corbyn doesn't have. And yet she was out first and has the support of the Kinnocks and the Reeds and the Darlings, and they're not really Darlings, if you know what I mean, but they're Alistair Darling. She's going to be hard to persuade to stand down in favour of somebody called Owen Smith, no?
I think so. I think, to be honest, it would be the wise move to stand down for Owen Smith. You know, the last few days of her campaign have been absolutely atrocious. Her campaign launch was slightly embarrassing for her.
It's been a disaster, yeah.
You know,
the eagle didn't fly, really.
No, it stumbled quite a bit, to be honest with you.
That embarrassing video where she's asking for the BBC, OK, Robert Peston, OK, Michael Crick, and none of them are there. I mean, if you were a stage performer, you would have counted that as dying on stage, wouldn't you?
No, of course. No, it was hugely embarrassing. And I think this is the main point which Mr Corbyn needs to hammer home, is that the challengers are calling for effective leadership, a more effective media performance. Angela Eagle
is
arguably less effective than Jeremy Corbyn, almost certainly. These people are calling for real leadership, and so far this coup has shown that they couldn't run a bath between themselves.
Isn't that the shoe which hasn't dropped, or the dog which hasn't barked? Here we have Angela Eagle with all her shortcomings. I make no reference to her size in that. Owen Smith, who virtually nobody in the country has ever heard of. I had never heard of him until I saw him on the television in this context. I didn't know he was an MP.
No.
But these bigger figures, Yvette Cooper, Andy Burnham, people who ran last time, they're silent in all of this.
Yes.
Is it possible that they are limbering up somewhere in a room waiting to enter this race?
This race, I don't think so. I think they've drafted Eagle and Smith for a specific reason. I don't actually think they expect to win this leadership election, but their tactic isn't going to be to lie down and accept another huge mandate for Jeremy Corbyn. It's going to be to challenge and challenge and challenge until he does eventually lose a leadership election.
That can't be allowed to happen, though, can it? You're right, that might well be the kamikaze tendency, but action would have to be taken to stop this. There would have to be some kind of rule change that didn't permit a challenge every year.
Yeah.
Imagine if the left were challenging the Labour leader every year.
Precisely.
Especially when we don't know when the next general election is. It will inevitably precipitate deselection moves against some of the 172 plotters, or those who followed the plotters.
Yep.
Are they really going to do that, or do you think they might be planning on an exit, an SDP-type exit?
I think they would rather try and regain control of the Labour Party. There are a lot of problems with the SDP exit. First and foremost is the first-past-the-post voting system. It will result in a damp squib for them, most certainly. I think a lot of the Labour right are considering it. I know there's been talks already. Well, if Andrea Leadsom won the Conservative leadership, there were talks between senior Conservative and senior Labour figures about creating a new centrist party. I can't see it happening, to be honest, because they know that it will result in failure. The SDP proved that last time. All it did was keep Labour down, whereas the SDP didn't gain many seats at all themselves. It was an absolute disaster by any means. Without a mandatory reselection policy, I imagine they will keep on trying. The only way to halt that is by electing a left slate on the National Executive Committee elections coming up very soon. And the good thing is that the 130,000 new Labour members can still vote in that election.
At least at the time of recording.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Matthew Turner, thanks for joining us on the Sputnik.
No problem.
Alas, that's all we've got time for. But you can stay in touch with us, of course, through Twitter and on Facebook. Until the next time, it's George Galloway saying, it's been marvellous.